Listen to me carefully. I am 74 years old now, and I moved halfway across the world when I was 71. People thought I had lost my mind. My own children looked at me across a Formica table in a diner in Detroit and asked me, "Dad, are you serious?" They could not fathom why a retired union man, a guy who spent 31 years on the line at a General Motors assembly plant, would pack up what little he had left and move to Hanoi, Vietnam. But let me tell you something about survival and about living. Back home in the States, I was spending $15 just to eat a meal that tasted like cardboard and loneliness. Here in the old quarter of Hanoi, amidst the chaos of millions of motorbikes and the thick, humid air that smells of roasted pork and star anise, I eat like a king for $3. More than that, I feel alive again. I feel the pulse of the street, the warmth of the people, and the incredible, undeniable power of food that is made with love and intention. You see, for 31 years, my life was dictated by the whistle at the General Motors plant. I am from Detroit, Michigan, not the suburbs, not Bloomfield Hills or Livonia, the city. I knew the rhythm of the stamping presses, the smell of grease and ozone, the ache in my lower back that became a permanent companion by the time I was 40. It was hard work, but it was honest, and it provided a life for my family. My wife, Betty, and I built our world around those shifts. We had our son, Eddie, who followed me into the auto plants, and our daughter, Patricia, who went off to college in Ann Arbor and never looked back. We had a good life. But the center of that life, the beating heart of our home on the east side of Detroit, was Betty's kitchen. Betty was a magician. She did not have expensive ingredients or fancy culinary training, but she had a cast iron skillet that she treated like a sacred relic. I actually shipped that exact skillet over here to Vietnam with me. It weighs a ton, cost a small fortune to transport, but I could not leave it behind. It is the anchor of my soul. Betty used that skillet to fry chicken that would make you weep, to sear thick pork chops smothered in caramelized onions, to bake cornbread that was crisp on the edges and soft as a cloud in the middle. Food, for Betty, was not just sustenance. It was how she spoke. It was how she said, "I love you," after I had worked a double shift and came home covered in grime. When you ate Betty's food, you felt cared for. You felt safe. 5 years before I made the decision to leave everything behind, Betty passed away. It was sudden. A heart attack in the very kitchen she had commanded for decades. The silence that fell over the house after she was gone was deafening. It was not just the loss of her voice or her laughter. It was the loss of the soul of our home. And immediately my diet changed. I stopped eating anything that mattered. I would go to the grocery store and wander the aisles like a ghost, filling my cart with frozen dinners that tasted like sodium and despair, cans of soup that I would heat up on the stove and eat standing over the sink. I was subsisting, not living. The joy of a meal, the ritual of sitting down at a table and sharing nourishment had died with my wife. Every time I looked at her cast iron skillet, sitting cold and unused on the stove, it felt like a physical blow to my chest. At the same time, the city I loved was changing around me. Detroit is a resilient place, but it has seen its share of hard times. The neighborhoods were shifting, friends were passing on, and the bitter winters felt colder every year. I was a retired widower living on a General Motors pension of $850 a month, plus my Social Security of $720 a month. That gave me a total of $1,570 every month. In the United States, that is not a life. That is a slow strangulation. Property taxes, heating bills, groceries, everything kept going up. A simple lunch at a diner, a decent sandwich, and a cup of coffee was running me $15, and it tasted like nothing. I felt myself fading away, becoming another invisible old man, waiting out the clock in a freezing house in a declining neighborhood. The turning point came on a Tuesday in late November. The sky was the color of a bruised plum, and the wind coming off the Detroit River cut right through my coat. I had gone to the local library just to be somewhere warm, and I found myself wandering through the travel section. I pulled a book off the shelf almost randomly. It was a memoir about expatriate living, and embedded within its pages was a reference to another book, a philosophy of sorts, called You Were Never Meant to Stay. That title struck me like a physical blow. You were never meant to stay. I had stayed in Detroit my whole life. I'd stayed in the same job, the same house, the same routines. But what if the rest of my life did not have to be a slow fade to black? The book talked about places in the world where a fixed income could provide a dignified life, places where community was still vibrant and where the climate did not punish your bones. It mentioned Southeast Asia, specifically Vietnam. I started reading everything I could find. I read about Hanoi, a city of lakes and ancient trees, a city famous for its street food. I watched videos of people cooking on the sidewalks, steam rising from massive pots of broth, the vibrant colors of fresh herbs and chilies. It reminded me in a strange, distant way of the life and energy Betty used to bring to our kitchen. It looked like a place where food still mattered. It looked like a place where people still lived out loud. When I told Eddie and Patricia, it did not go well. We met at a Coney Island diner on Woodward Avenue. Eddie had just gotten off his shift, his hands stained with the same grease I used to scrub off my own. When I laid out my plan, that I was selling the house, packing 2 suitcases and Betty's skillet, and moving to Hanoi, they stared at me as if I had spoken in tongues. "Vietnam? Are you serious?" Eddie practically shouted. "Dad, you are 71 years old. You do not speak the language. You do not know anyone there. What if you get sick? What are you going to eat?" Patricia was crying, worried about the distance, worried that I was having some sort of a delayed, grief-induced breakdown. I understood their fear. I really did. But I looked down at my $15 plate of soggy hash browns and rubbery eggs, and I knew I could not stay. I told them, "I love you both, but if I stay here, I am just waiting to die. I need to go somewhere where I can afford to live, and maybe, just maybe, remember how to enjoy a meal again." Arriving in Hanoi was an assault on the senses in the best possible way. I stepped out of Noi Bai International Airport into a wall of heat and humidity that felt like a physical embrace. The drive into the city was a blur of neon lights, endless streams of motorbikes weaving like schools of fish, and the scent of exhaust mixed with the intoxicating aroma of roasting meats and frying garlic. I rented a small, clean apartment in the Ba Dinh district, not far from the old quarter, for $350 a month. That left me with over $1,200 a month from my pension and Social Security. For the first time in years, I was not counting pennies. I had breathing room, but the real revelation was the Old Quarter. It is a labyrinth of 36 streets, each historically dedicated to a specific trade. Today it is a street food paradise. In Hanoi, life happens on the sidewalk. People do not hide away in their dining rooms. They pull up tiny, brightly colored plastic stools that make my old knees ache, but I do not care, and they eat together. The first time I sat down at a street stall, I was terrified. I pointed at what the person next to me was eating. It was a steaming bowl of pho bo, beef noodle soup. The vendor, a woman whose face was lined with years of hard work, handed me a bowl. The broth was clear but deeply colored, shimmering with fat. It was fragrant with star anise, cinnamon, charred ginger, and roasted onions. The flat rice noodles were impossibly tender, and the thin slices of beef cooked instantly in the scalding broth. I added a squeeze of fresh lime, a few slices of fiery red chili, and a handful of Thai basil and sawtooth coriander, just like I saw the locals doing. I took my first sip of that broth, and I swear to you, time stopped. The complexity of the flavor, the hours of simmering bones, the absolute care that had gone into that single bowl, it overwhelmed me. I sat there on a tiny blue plastic stool on a noisy, chaotic street in Hanoi, and I started to cry, because for the first time since Betty died, I tasted food that felt like it had a soul. I tasted food that reminded me of the care she put into her cooking. It was a profound, healing moment, and it cost me less than $2. From that day on, I made it my mission to explore the culinary landscape of the city. I became a regular at a bun cha stall down a narrow alley near my apartment. Bun cha is a revelation. They grill fatty pork patties and slices of pork belly over charcoal right on the sidewalk. The smoke fills the air, drawing you in. They serve the grilled meat in a bowl of warm, sweet, and savory dipping sauce made from fish sauce, vinegar, sugar, and green papaya. You take a pinch of cold rice, vermicelli, noodles, dip it into the smoky, savory broth, add a leaf of fresh perilla or mint, and eat it together. It is an explosion of textures and flavors. Sweet, salty, smoky, fresh. I eat there twice a week, and the family who runs the stall now greets me with massive smiles, shouting, "Hello, Grandpa," in Vietnamese when they see me coming. A massive portion, enough to leave me completely stuffed, costs about $3. Then there is ban, kuwan, delicate, almost translucent steamed rice rolls filled with seasoned minced pork and wood ear mushrooms, topped with crispy fried shallots and served with a side of chalua, a type of Vietnamese pork sausage. You watch the women make it, spreading the rice batter paper thin over a cloth stretched tightly over a pot of boiling water. It is a mesmerizing dance of culinary skill, and the result is a breakfast that is light, flavorful, and incredibly satisfying. That usually sets me back about $1.50. For lunch, I often seek out com bin dan, which translates roughly to working people's rice. It is basically a buffet-style stall where you point at the dishes you want. You get a massive plate of steamed rice and can choose from dozens of options. Caramelized pork belly with hard-boiled eggs, tofu simmered in tomato sauce, stir-fried morning glory with garlic, fried fish with lemongrass. I load up my plate with 3 or 4 different dishes, grab a glass of iced green tea, and sit shoulder to shoulder with construction workers, office clerks, and students. We might not speak the same language, but there is a shared understanding, a communal appreciation for a hearty, affordable meal. A massive plate of com bin Dan rarely costs me more than $2.50. The financial breakdown of my life here still astounds me. My total monthly income is $1,570. Rent is $350. Electricity, water, and incredibly fast internet cost me about $60 a month. I spend perhaps $300 a month on food, and that is eating out for almost every single meal, enjoying coffees, fresh fruit juices, and the occasional local beer. I have hundreds of dollars left over every month. I am saving money. I am traveling to the mountains of Sapa and the beaches of Da Nang. I even use Betty's cast iron skillet to make American-style breakfasts on the weekends for my Vietnamese neighbors, sharing a piece of my history with them just as they share their culture with me. The food culture here is not just about the ingredients, it is about the community. In Detroit, I was isolated. In Hanoi, I am part of the neighborhood fabric. The woman who sells me my morning Vietnamese iced coffee with sweetened condensed milk knows exactly how I like it. The fruit vendor down the street always tosses an extra mango into my bag with a wink. When I caught a nasty cold during my first winter here, the lady who runs the P.O. stall near my building sent her son up to my apartment with a steaming container of chicken porridge packed with ginger and scallions. They take care of each other here, and to my endless gratitude, they have taken care of me. Let me tell you more about the markets. The early morning markets in Hanoi are a symphony of color and sound. Long before the sun rises, the vendors are setting up their stalls. The smell of fresh herbs, mint, cilantro, Thai basil, lemongrass, fills the humid air. You see women in conical hats skillfully butchering cuts of pork, their knives moving with a practiced rhythmic precision. The fish are still swimming in shallow plastic tubs, guaranteeing absolute freshness. In Detroit, my connection to food had been severed. It was just packages wrapped in plastic under fluorescent lights. Here, you see the source. You see the soil on the roots of the vegetables. You look the person who grew your food in the eye. That connection, that immediacy, it changes how you eat. It changes how you value what you put into your body. During the Lunar New Year, Tet, the entire city shuts down to celebrate with food. Families spend days preparing ban chung, square sticky rice cakes filled with mung bean and fatty pork, wrapped tightly in dong leaves and boiled for 10 hours. The preparation is a communal event, generations gathering around the boiling pots, sharing stories and keeping watch through the night. I was invited by my landlord's family to join their Tet preparations my second year here, sitting around that fire, listening to the melodic chatter of a language I was only beginning to understand, smelling the earthy aroma of the boiling leaves. I felt a profound sense of belonging. I was not just a foreigner passing through. I was a neighbor, a friend, an elder to be respected. In America, we often hide our elderly away in quiet facilities. Here, age brings a certain reverence. The younger people at the food stalls always serve me first. They offer me the best cuts of meat. They call me Ong, meaning grandfather. That respect, combined with the phenomenal food, is a powerful elixir. It breathes life back into weary bones. Living here has also changed my relationship with money. In the United States, I was constantly anxious. Every trip to the mailbox brought the dread of another utility bill or a property tax assessment. My pension of $850 and Social Security of $720 were stretched to the absolute breaking point. I was agonizing over whether to buy brand name cereal or the generic bag. I was skipping meals to ensure I could keep the heat on in January. That kind of chronic financial stress wears down your spirit. It ages you faster than the years do. But here in Vietnam, that anxiety has completely evaporated. When my monthly income of $1,570 hits my bank account, I know I am safe. I know I can pay my rent of $350, cover my utilities, and still eat out for every single meal. I can afford to be generous. I can buy a round of Bia Hoi, fresh, unpasteurized, local draft beer that costs about 30 cents a glass for the guys at my local corner spot. The psychological freedom of not constantly worrying about outliving my money is perhaps the greatest gift this move has given me. And I still have Betty's skillet. Every Sunday morning I perform a small ritual. I take down that heavy cast iron pan, the one that seasoned countless Detroit dinners, and I make an American breakfast. I fry bacon. I scramble eggs with cheese. I toast thick slices of bread. The smell of frying bacon wafting out of my window into the Hanoi alleyway always draws curious looks and smiles from my neighbors. I usually make extra and pass a plate to the kids playing outside. They devour it, their faces greasy and happy. It is a bridge between my past and my present. The skillet reminds me of the love I had, the life I built in America, while the chaotic, beautiful city outside my window represents the life I have chosen for my final chapters. I am not running from my past. I am carrying it with me into a future I never could have imagined. I am 74 years old and I am still hungry. Hungry for the next meal, hungry for the next experience, hungry for life. And at $3 a plate, I can afford to eat my fill. Now I will not lie and say it is a flawless paradise. Hanoi is intense. The traffic is terrifying. Crossing the street is an exercise in blind faith and steady walking. You just step off the curb and trust that the sea of motorbikes will flow around you like water around a stone. The air pollution can be heavy, especially in the dry season, and the summers are blisteringly hot and humid. Even the winters get surprisingly cold, a damp chill that seeps into your bones, which reminds me of Detroit, though without the snow. But the minor inconveniences pale in comparison to the quality of life I have gained. Last year, Eddie and Patricia finally came to visit. They were nervous, expecting to find me living in squalor or struggling to survive. Instead, I met them at the airport looking healthier and happier than I had in a decade. I had lost 20 pounds, my blood pressure was down, and I had a tan. I took them to my favorite street stalls. I made them sit on the tiny plastic stools. I watched Patricia's eyes widen as she took her first bite of bun cha, and I saw Eddie devour a banh mi sandwich, a crusty French baguette stuffed with pâté, roasted pork, cucumber, cilantro, and chili, and declare it the best thing he had ever eaten. We walked around Hoan Kem Lake in the evening, watching the city light up, and Eddie turned to me and said, "Dad, I get it now. I really get it." They saw that I was not just surviving on my pension, I was thriving. I was eating better for $3 a meal, than I ever did for $15 back home. If you are watching this and you are sitting in a quiet house, worrying about the heating bill, eating a microwave dinner, and wondering if this is all there is left for you, I want you to remember that book title, You Were Never Meant to Stay. You do not have to accept a diminished life just because you are getting older. The world is vast, and there are places where your money goes further, where the climate is kinder, and where the culture values connection and community. For me, salvation came in the form of a steaming bowl of broth on a noisy sidewalk. It came through the realization that food is love, and that I could find that love again halfway across the world. I am Gene Kowalczyk. I am 74 years old. I am a retired auto worker from Detroit, and every single day I sit on a tiny plastic stool in Hanoi, Vietnam, and I eat the most incredible food of my life. I am alive. And if I can do this, if I can find a new beginning at 71, then what is stopping you? In America, we are obsessed with convenience. Everything is prepackaged, pre-washed, pre-cooked. We have traded the soul of our meals for the illusion of saved time. When I was working on the assembly line, I understood the need for speed. We were cogs in a machine, and our food was just fuel to keep the machine running. But Betty understood something deeper. She understood that a meal was a pause button on the chaos of the world. When she cooked, she was demanding that we stop. We sit down. We look at each other. She never wrote down a recipe in her entire life. It was all feel, all memory, all instinct. A pinch of this, a dash of that, cooking by smell and by sight. That is exactly how they cook here in Hanoi. There are no measuring cups at the street stalls. There are no timers. The woman making the pichot knows when the broth is ready. By the exact shade of golden brown it turns. She is cooking with the same instinct, the same soul that my Betty did. And that is why it shattered me so completely when I tasted it. It was like hearing a language I thought had gone extinct. You see, after Betty died, the silence in the house was not just the absence of her voice. It was the absence of the chopping on the cutting board. It was the absence of the sizzle of onions hitting the hot cast iron. The house became a tomb, and I became a ghost haunting my own life. I tried initially to keep cooking. I really did. I stood in her kitchen, surrounded by her things, and tried to make her famous meatloaf. But my hands felt clumsy. The ingredients felt foreign. And when I finally pulled it out of the oven, it tasted like ash in my mouth. That was the day I gave up. That was the day I surrendered to the frozen dinners and the canned soup. I accepted that the flavorful part of my life was over. And that acceptance is a dangerous thing. It seeps into every other aspect of your life. When you stop caring about what you eat, you stop caring about yourself. You stop going for walks. You stop calling your friends. You stop looking at the sky. You just put your head down and wait for the end. That is where I was when I stumbled across that book. You Were Never Meant to Stay. It was a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. It was permission to reject the narrative that my life was effectively over. The transition was not seamless. The first few weeks were a blur of jet lag, culture shock, and profound disorientation. The language barrier was an immense wall. Vietnamese is a tonal language. The word for pho can mean completely different things depending on how you inflect your voice. I spent my first month pointing at menus, hoping for the best and pantomiming my thanks. I got lost in the labyrinthine alleys of the old quarter more times than I can count. I sweated through my shirts in the oppressive humidity. I was terrified of crossing the street, but then the routine set in. And the routine was entirely centered around food. In Detroit, my routine was waking up, staring at the television, eating a piece of toast, and waiting for the day to end. In Hanoi, my routine became an adventure. I would wake up at 6 in the morning when the air was still relatively cool and the city was just beginning to stir. I would walk down to the corner for a bowl of pho or a plate of ban kuan. I would sit on a tiny stool, watching the city come alive, sipping my hot broth and feeling the warmth spread through my chest. For lunch, I would explore a new neighborhood, seeking out a specific dish I had read about or seen someone eating. I discovered bun bo hue, a spicy lemongrass-infused beef noodle soup from central Vietnam that clears your sinuses and sets your soul on fire. I discovered chaka, the turmeric fish I mentioned earlier, cooked tableside with heaps of fresh dill. I discovered bancio, crispy, savory crepes filled with pork, shrimp, and bean sprouts, wrapped in mustard leaves and dipped in sweet and sour fish sauce. Every meal was a revelation. Every meal was an education. And through the food, I began to understand the culture. I learned that leaving a little bit of food on your plate is a sign of politeness, indicating that the host has provided more than enough. I learned how to use chopsticks, not just to eat, but to serve others, reversing the sticks to use the clean ends when picking food from a communal plate. I learned the immense respect the Vietnamese have for their elders. I was never ignored. I was always offered a seat. The vendors would often give me extra portions, a silent acknowledgement of my age and my presence in their country. When Betty died, I thought my story was over. I thought the rest of my life would just be an epilogue, a slow winding down of the clock. But sitting here in Hanoi, listening to the roar of the motorbikes and smelling the incredible aromas wafting from the street stalls, I realized that I was wrong. The story was not over. It just needed a change of scenery. It needed a new chapter. Food is not just sustenance. It is history. It is culture. It is love made visible. When Betty cooked, she was telling us she loved us. When the vendors here in Hanoi cook, they are carrying on traditions that stretch back generations. They are pouring their souls into those massive pots of broth, and by sitting down and eating it, by appreciating it, I am participating in that love. I am participating in that history. This daily ritual of eating well has transformed me physically too. The arthritis in my knees, which used to flare up terribly in the damp Detroit winters, has eased significantly in the tropical climate. The fresh ingredients, the abundance of vegetables and herbs, the lean proteins, my body has responded by shedding the lethargy that plagued me back home. I walk everywhere now. I navigate the chaotic sidewalks, dodging vendors and parked motorbikes with a spryness I haven't felt since I was in my 50s. When Eddie and Patricia saw me, that was what shocked them the most. I didn't just look healthier, I moved differently. I had energy. I spend my afternoons now reading in cafes, nursing a robust, chocolatey Vietnamese Robusta coffee, slowly dripping through a thin filter over ice and condensed milk. I watch the world go by. I write letters to my grandchildren, I chat with other expatriates and locals, exchanging stories and recommendations. I am learning the language, slowly but surely mastering enough phrases to express my gratitude and compliment the chefs. Ngon lam, I say, very delicious, and their faces light up. It is a simple exchange, but it bridges the gap between our cultures. Every evening, as the sun sets over West Lake, I walk along the promenade, feeling the warm breeze off the water. The city transitions from the frenetic energy of the day to a slightly more relaxed, communal atmosphere. Families bring their children out to play, teenagers gather on their motorbikes to socialize, and the street food stalls light up, casting a warm, inviting glow over the sidewalks. I usually find a quiet spot to sit and reflect on the incredible journey that brought me here. I think about Betty often, but the memories are no longer sharp with the pain of immediate loss. Instead, they are warm and comforting. I feel her presence when I cook in her skillet, when I share a meal with my neighbors, when I savor the flavors of a perfectly executed dish. I realize now that by embracing this new life, I am not leaving her behind. I am honoring the love of life and the joy of food that she embodied. I am living the vibrant, flavorful life she would have wanted for me. So, this is my message to you from a 74-year-old retired auto worker sitting in the heart of Hanoi. Do not let the world tell you that your story is over. Do not accept a life of quiet desperation simply because it is what is expected of you. If you are struggling on a fixed income, if you are isolated, if you have forgotten what it feels like to truly enjoy a meal, look outward. There is a whole world out there, vibrant, affordable, and welcoming. Take the leap. Pack your bags. Find a place where your money gives you dignity, where the culture embraces you, and where the food reminds you that you are alive. Your next great adventure might just be waiting for you. A bowl of steaming noodles on a busy street corner, thousands of miles from the place you used to call home. I took that leap and it saved my life. I am Gene Kowalczyk and this is my story. Thank you for listening.